In this video, I'm going to be reading a short section from the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist from Austria, and during World War II, he was captured by the Nazis and sent to concentration camps. He was actually at 4 different ones, including Auschwitz. His wife, who he had just recently married, perished in the camps along with his father and several other family members, but Frankl himself managed to survive. After the war, Frankl, like many other survivors, wanted to know what it was that helped him navigate the unbelievable atrocities that he saw and experienced in these camps. He ended up writing numerous books on psychology, and he ended up focusing heavily on topics that overlapped with existentialism, a philosophy movement or movement in philosophy that had swept much of Europe in the wake of World War II. Really emerged as, in some sense, as a response to the horrors of the Second World War. Some of these topics included the question of how people should respond when they are confronted with real and serious infringements on their freedom, the question of whether there is anything that a human being can hold on to in situations like that. That is there anything that a human being can say, this I have control over, even if everything else is taken from me? And ultimately, the question of what drives human beings to do what they do, to be how they are. Is it a drive to pleasure? Is it a drive for power? Or something else? Additionally, another topic that overlaps between existentialist philosophy and Frankl's own brand of psychology was this idea that it is through our choices that we make ourselves into who we are. So I'll be reading a short section from this book. In this particular edition, it begins on page 56 and runs to page 59. And in this section, Frankl has just learned that his friend has hatched a plan to escape the concentration camp that they're in. After initially seizing upon this opportunity to escape, Frankl ends up changing his mind, and he decides to return to the camp so that he can take care of some typhus patients who are dying, essentially providing them a kind of hospice care to whatever extent he's able. As a psychiatrist, Frankl had some medical training. Given the circumstances, his decision to not escape seems to defy logic and reason. It seems absurd. Why wouldn't he escape? Yet Frankl describes the feeling that he experienced after turning around and returning to these patients in the camp as a profound inner peace that he had never experienced before. So why did he turn around? And what was the source of this inner peace? And what does he want the reader to take away from this account? This particular episode in the book, in my opinion, is one of the most impactful and illuminating in the text. Despite being only a few short pages, a number of important themes and ideas that are central to existentialist philosophy and also to Frankl's brand of existentialist psychology emerge in this short description. And these include this notion of fate, the importance of choice, and the importance of responsibility. The camp inmate was frightened of making decisions and of taking any sort of initiative whatsoever. This was the result of a strong feeling that fate was one's master, and that one must not try to influence it in any way, but instead let it take its own course. In addition, there was a great apathy, which contributed in no small part to the feelings of the prisoner. At times, lightning decisions had to be made, decisions which spelled life or death. The prisoner would have preferred to let fate make the choice for him. This escape from commitment was most apparent when a prisoner had to make the decision for or against an escape attempt. In those minutes in which he had to make up his mind, and it was always a question of minutes, he suffered the tortures of hell. Should he make the attempt to flee? Should he take the risk? I too experienced this torment. As the battlefront drew nearer, I had the opportunity to escape. A colleague of mine who had to visit huts outside the camp in the course of his medical duties wanted to escape and take me with him. Under the pretense of holding a consultation about a patient whose illness required a specialist's advice, he smuggled me out. Outside the camp, a member of a foreign resistance movement was to supply us with uniforms and documents. At the last moment, there were some technical difficulties, and we had to return to camp once more. We used this opportunity to provide ourselves with provisions, a few rotten potatoes, and to look for a rucksack. We broke into an empty hut of the women's camp, which was vacant, as the women had been sent to another camp. The hut was in great disorder. It was obvious that many women had acquired supplies and fled. There were rags, straw, rotting food, and broken crockery. Some bowls were still in good condition and would have been very valuable to us, but we decided not to take them. We knew that lately, as conditions had become desperate, they had been used not only for food, but also as wash basins and chamber pots. There was a strictly enforced rule against having any kind of utensil in the hut. However, some people were forced to break this rule, especially the typhus patients, who were much too weak to go outside even with help. While I acted as a screen, my friend broke into the hut and returned shortly with a rucksack, which he hid under his coat. He had seen another one inside which I was to take. So we changed places, and I went in. As I searched in the rubbish, finding the rucksack and even a toothbrush, I suddenly saw, among all the things that had been left behind, the body of a woman. I ran back to my hut to collect all my possessions, my food bowl, a pair of torn mittens inherited from a dead typhus patient, and a few scraps of paper covered with shorthand notes, on which, as I mentioned before, I had started to reconstruct the manuscript which I had lost at Auschwitz. I made a quick last round of my patients, who were lying huddled on the rotten planks of wood on either side of the huts. I came to my only countryman, who was almost dying, and whose life it had been my ambition to save in spite of his condition. I had to keep my intention to escape to myself, but my comrades seemed to guess that something was wrong. Perhaps I showed a little nervousness. In a tired voice, he asked me, "You too are getting out?" I denied it, but I found it difficult to avoid his sad look. After my rounds, I returned to him. Again, a hopeless look greeted me, and somehow I felt it to be an accusation. The unpleasant feeling that had gripped me as soon as I had told my friend I would escape with him became more intense. Suddenly, I decided to take fate into my own hands for once. I ran out of the hut and told my friends that I could not go with him. As soon as I had told him with finality that I had made up my mind to stay with my patients, the unhappy feeling left me. I did not know what the following days would bring, but I had gained an inward peace that I had never experienced before. I returned to the hut, sat down on the boards at my countryman's feet, and tried to comfort him. Then I chatted with the others, trying to quiet them in their delirium.